The Byzantine Empire, the beauty of Constantinople. Several chapters ago, we read that the Roman Empire got too big for one emperor to rule alone. So the Roman empire was divided into two parts. The part of Roman Empire that still had Rome in it was called the Western Roman Empire, and the rest of the empire became known as the Eastern Roman Empire. Its capital city was known as Constantinople. When the barbarians flooded into the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire fell apart, and the Eastern Roman Empire lost land to the barbarians too. It shrank until the Eastern Roman Emperor only ruled the land right around Constantinople. But the Eastern Roman Empire survived. We call it last surviving part of the Roman Empire the Byzantine Empire. We call it Byzantines and their emperor Byzantines, the Byzantine Emperor. Byzantine Empire was small at first, but the invaders had taken so much of its land away. But then strong warlike emperors began to conquer some of the land that once belonged to Rome. Eventually, the Byzantine Empire spread all around the Mediterranean Sea. Constantinople, the capital city of the Byzantine Empire, became the biggest city in the world. It was larger and richer than Rome has ever been. Imagine that you're walking through the streets of Constantinople. The roads beneath you is smoothly paved. The Byzantines know that the Roman art of making good roads out of rock and cement. They will push and jostle you from every side. There are almost 1 million people in the city. Many of the people are dressed like Romans in togas and white robes draped over their shoulder and belt around the middle. You pass a beautiful shop selling silks, jewelry, and all kinds of food: peaches, almonds, peanuts, grapes, fish, bowls of hot lentil soup, and cups of white kidney beans cooked with sage and onion. The smell of fruit, meat, and soup mixed together and float out into the streets. Suddenly, you're feeling very hungry. You don't see many children on the streets. Where are all the children? You ask a woman cheering by. She is wearing a beautiful blue wool cloak edged with gold thread. They're in school, of course, the woman answered. They have schools for all the children, even poor ones. The little ones are working on their reading and writing. The older students are reading the great books written by the Greeks and Romans. All children should have better things to do than run around in the streets. Excuse me, I gotta go. I'm a lady in waiting to the Empress, and I'll go to get her to her palace right away. Where's the palace, he asked. The woman laughs. What do you mean, the palace? We have 14 palaces in Constantinople. The emperor and his court have 5. The ladies of the court have 6 more of their own. And we have 3 palaces for people who work for the emperor. But you can't go inside them because you're just a commoner. You want to see the beautiful building? Go visit our biggest church, Hagia Sophia. It's right up there. He points to a huge marble dome up ahead of her and hurries away. You walk towards the dome. The top of Hagia Sophia shines bright white in the sun, and the wall is gold red. The dome in the middle is surrounded by smaller domes around it. If you make your way through the main door, sunlight is everywhere. The church has high windows all around the top of the walls, and the whole ceiling is covered with pure gold that glitters in the sun. The stones of the walls are in different colors: purple, green, crimson, and white. The columns rise up all around you. Even Rome never had a beautiful building as this. Justinian, the just emperor. The powerful rulers made Constantinople great, and one of the most powerful rulers in Byzantium was Justinian, the just emperor. Justinian's parents weren't important people. They were just peasants who lived hundreds of miles away from the great city of Constantinople. They grew crops and tended animals for a living. But Justinian didn't want to be a farmer. He wanted to be a great educated man. He learned how to read and write. He spent every spare minute studying law, music, poetry, and religious books. He begged his family to send him to Constantinople so that he could go to school. Finally, Justinian's parents agreed. They packed his clothes and books. His mother cooked him bread and meat to enjoy on the journey. The just in time began the long journey to the city of Castanpol. When he arrived in the city, he was overwhelmed. The beings were the biggest he had ever seen. People swarmed everywhere, and his studies were very difficult. He had to memorize 50 lines of Greek poetry every day. He had to learn how to make convincing speeches in public. The teachers of the school gave him hours of homework every day in math, music, and astronomy. When he finished school, youngest son joined the army. He was brave and full of energy and spent hours helping the officers keep record other supplies and plan their campaigns. Soon, more and more people agreed. Justine could make a great emperor. When the emperor died, Justinian was named the ruler of the Byzantine Empire. When Justinian became emperor in the year 527, Byzantium wasn't very big yet, but Justinian decided to change that. He had read many books about the greatness and glory of the old Roman Empire. He wanted that empire back. So Justinian recruited more and more men into this army. He set off on campaigns to conquer the countries that used to belong to Rome. Italy, North Africa, Spain, and the countries all around the shores of the Mediterranean. He even took Rome away from the barbarians who were living there. But the war to recapture Rome destroyed what was left of the old city. Justinian had nothing left but ruins. But Justinian recaptured all the land that used to belong to Rome? No, but he made it to the Byzantine Empire that it had ever been before. Now that he ruled all of these different countries, Justinian had his problems. Each country has its own laws. Something that was against the law in one country might be perfectly fine in another country. A thief might be put of debt in one part of the empire, but only told to pay a fine in the other part. It was very confusing to rule an empire full of different laws, so Justinian set out to make one set of laws for everyone in his empire. It was a huge job. Hundreds of scholars helped him to collect all the laws of ancient Romans and Greeks so that a new law could be written. Finally, the new set of laws, the Code of Justinian, was finished. Everyone in the Byzantine Empire was supposed to follow these laws. Here are some laws from the Code of Justinian. The sea and the seashore belongs to everyone. Every person in my empire is allowed to go to the beach. No one can tell them, I own this part of the beach, get off it. Rivers belong to everyone. Everyone in my empire can fish in rivers without being told to stop. If you find a jewel or another treasure up on the shore, you can keep it for yourself. You're allowed to own slaves and make them work without pay. But you can't beat or mistreat slaves unless they are disobedient. A thief who steals something valuable must pay the owner 4 times what is the object's worth. If you're trimming a tree near a road, be sure to call out to anyone coming by. Be careful, limbs might fall on you. If you don't call out a warning and a limb falls on the traveler and hurts him, it's your fault. But if you call a warning and the traveler walks under a tree anyway, it isn't your fault. If a limb falls on him and hurts him, you should have paid attention to a warning. When a bishop, priest, or pastor is praying or preaching, he has to speak loud enough for everyone to hear. If he doesn't, God will punish him. And so will the emperor. Do you think these are fair laws? Would you change them? The Empress Theodora. Justinian was a powerful empire, but he didn't rule the Byzantine Empire all alone. His wife, Empress Theodora, was a brilliant, energetic woman who had helped him make his decision. Theodora wasn't always an empress. Her parents ran the circus at the Hippodrome, a huge area in Castanpol. Her father was the circus bear trainer. Little Theodora used to sit in the warm sand of the arena and watch him work with his bears. Sometimes she fed the bears apples and honey to reward them for doing their tricks. When she grew older, Theodora went to work as a clown in the circus. She painted her face white and pretended as she couldn't speak. The audience loved Theodora's act, but Theodora was acting in place well and attracting to hundreds of fans. They came to see her shows, threw flowers at her, and applauded at her performances. Theodora was success. She got to travel all around the Byzantine Empire, staying in the best inns, eating the best foods, and drinking the best wine. But one day, Theodora heard about Christianity and decided to become a Christian. I can't go on and bringing antics, going to parties every night and doing whatever I please, she thought. I need to have a different kind of life, a quiet, peaceful life. So Theodora left her job as an actress and moved to Constantinople and became a wool spinner. She spent her days quietly making wool thread out of sheep wool and selling it to the merchants of Constantinople. One day Theodora was walking through the market with a basket full of yarn when she heard, make way for the soldiers of the royal army." And she stepped out of the way and craned her neck to see the soldiers. Justine hadn't become the emperor yet. He was still serving in the army, so he was riding with the other soldiers wearing a red cloak over shining armor. His sword was hanging by his side. And Theodora thought he was the most handsome man he had ever seen. Justine saw Theodora was standing by the road. "Who is that beautiful woman?" he asked the soldiers beside him. The other soldiers only shrugged. "I must find out," Justine said to himself. "I want to know who she is at once." After a long search, Justine found Theodora's home. He was welcomed by her beauty and charmed by her intelligence. He fell in love with her and married her. And when he became emperor, Theodora became empress. The two of them ruled side by side, and Justine rarely made a decision without consulting with his wife. 5 years after Justine became emperor, the people of Constantinople rioted. They wanted Justine to get rid of 2 men who worked for him. 2 men who were very unpopular. When Justine refused, the crowd became more and more angry. They charged through the streets of the city, overturning the merchants' songs, wrecking walls, and burning buildings. They even set a fire to Hagia Sophia. They killed policemen and gathered around the emperor's palace shouting, "Victory! Victory!" Justine was terrified. "If they break into our palace, they'll kill us both," he exclaimed. "Let's leave Constantinople at once." "If you run away, they'll take the throne away from you," Theodora warned him. "You'll never be emperor again." "That's better than dying," Justine retorted. "You can run away if you want to," Theodora said. "You have plenty of money and you can always sail away in the royal ships. But I never want to give up my royal purple cloak and my crown. How can someone who has ever been emperor and agree to becoming a wandering refugee? If you run away, you will soon wish that you had died instead." Finally, Theodora convinced Justine to stay. He ordered his generals to lead the army against the rebels. The fight was long and hard, but Justine's men won. Justine kept his throne and rebuilt the damaged city. He made Hagia Sophia even bigger and beautiful than ever. And for the rest of his life, he was grateful for Theodora keeping him in Constantinople. The empress had saved emperor's throne. The church in the east. After the riots that nearly frightened him out of Constantinople, Justine ordered the burned buildings to be rebuilt. Hagia Sophia, Constantinople's biggest church, had been almost completely destroyed. So Justine decided to hire 2 very famous architects to design and build a new church. This new Hagia Sophia had big domes, big windows, and huge open spaces. It was decorated with paintings and mosaics. Mosaics were pictures made by arranging colored pieces into a pattern. These patterns were called terrace. Terrace could be made out of stone, marble, glass, wood, or clay, or even gold and silver. By setting the terrace close together, the artists could make beautiful patterns, and they could even make pictures of people and animals. The mosaics were like whole scenes, like a man leading a donkey or an emperor and his whole court. Making a mosaic was slow and careful work. First, the artist would cover the walls or ceiling with a thin layer of plaster, which was thick, white, and sticky like glue. Then the artist would carefully and slowly begin to treasure it into place. In a shop or a house, the terrace would be a little colored pieces of glass, stone, or clay, or wooden painted pieces of different color. But in a beautiful church or palace, terrace would be most likely to be made of bits of marble or pieces of silver. Mosaics in the Hagia Sophia are especially bright and shining because the artists who made them covered glass cubes with gold and made the backgrounds of the mosaic pictures out of glittering terrace. Each glass cube was set into a plaster at a slightly different angle. When the sun shines on the golden mosaics of the Hagia Sophia, light bounces off the pictures in all different directions. The pictures seem to glow in the light. Many people saw the mosaics of Hagia Sophia because the church became the center of a whole group of Christians. Remember, after the fall of Rome, many Christians in the lands who once belonged to believed the Pope was their leader. They believed that God has given him the job of looking after all the Christians. But not all Christians agreed. Those Christians who lived in Constantinople, as well as many Christians who lived in Africa, Asia, and the eastern part of the continent, didn't believe that the Pope should be able to make decisions for the whole church. Instead, they thought the leaders of churches in Jerusalem, Rome, and Constantinople, and 2 other important cities should join together to make decisions. And the Christians everywhere would join in, saying, yes, those decisions are right. This was a very different way to think about a Christian church. As time went on, the Pope, who was in the western of Europe, the leaders of the Christian church in the East disagreed and more how the church should be led. Finally, the Christian church divided into 2 groups. In authority, the Pope became known as Roman Catholics. The Christians in the further East, including those in the Byzantine Empire, became known as the Orthodox or the Eastern Orthodox. Orthodox Christians called their leaders partiologists. They had their own prayers and their own rites, ways of worshiping gods. The Eastern Christians like to tell stories about Christians who had lived past to have been faithful to God. One of these Christians are called Nicholas. Here's a story about that the Christians of the Byzantine Empire told about Nicholas. Nicholas lived in Asia Minor. His parents were Christians, but they died when Nicholas was very young, leaving him lots of money. Nowadays, a girl could not get married unless her father gave a gift of money to her husband. In the village where Nicholas lived, a very poor family with 3 daughters. Each girl was in love with a young man and wanted to get married, but their father had no money to give them. One cold, snowy night, Nicholas was walking around this house of this poor family when he heard a girl weeping there in the window. House of his poor family. When he heard a girl weeping, he stopped and came closer. There in the window sat one of the daughters, crying and crying. He came even closer until he could hear what he said. The girl wept. Oh, I will never be able to marry the woman I love. My sisters and I would live here in poverty for the rest of our lives, and I will live here in poverty for the rest of my lives, and all because my father has no money. Nicholas couldn't bear such sadness. He ran quickly home and gathered as much coins as he could find into a bag. Then he ran back through the snow to the house where the girl sat weeping. He didn't want anyone to know he had brought in gold, so he drew his sword back, aimed carefully, and threw the bag up top to the chimney. A moment later, he heard the girl exclaim, "Look! Something has fallen into the fireplace. What is it?" He crept away, satisfied that he had given them girls and father money enough for her wedding. But later that night, he thought, what about her 2 sisters? Suppose they would wish to get married too. We'll pay money for them. The next morning, Nicholas returned with another bag of gold. Again, he threw the bag down the chimney into the fireplace. Then the next time he came back with 3rd gold and did the same thing. Next spring, all 3 daughters were married. They wore beautiful gowns stitched with gold and reds, white flowers on their heads. Their father and mother danced together with joy at the wedding feast. And Nicholas watched, happy that his gift, given in secret, had brought so much happiness. As time went on, Nicholas was told and retold by Christmas in the Byzantine Empire. Soon Nicholas was called a saint, a person who has a special relationship with the god. The Emperor Justine built a cathedral to honor Saint Nicholas, the Catholic temple, and his story spread all over the world. In many countries, children gave gifts on Saint Nicholas' special day, December 6th. Sometimes they put their shoes next to the door. In the morning, the shoes were filled with chocolate coins wrapped in golden foil to remind them of the gold Saint Nicholas had given to the three poor girls. Do you know that Saint Nicholas had another name? Sometimes he's called Santa Claus. The story of Santa Claus comes from the story of Saint Nicholas, a Christian from the Byzantine Empire. Chapter 5. The medieval Indian Empire. A king named Sikadunka. If you were traveling in the Middle Ages, you might find yourself walking or riding around the dangerous lands that used to belong to Rome. There was no king or emperor to keep peace. Instead, many different war leaders ruled over little kingdoms of their own, and these war leaders were always fighting each other. You might be riding innocently along to visit your cousins far away and be caught in the middle of a battle between the war bands, or bandits might attack you and steal your horse and all your belongings. The travel in the Byzantine Empire was much safer. You could ride your horse along the roads of peace. Justinian and the other emperors made sure that that their subjects obeyed the laws. And the soldiers of the Byzantine Empire helped to protect their people from robbers and invaders. You could also feel safe traveling down into India, like Byzantium. India had a king who ruled over a large, peaceful empire. Imagine that you decide to leave Byzantium and go to the east. Remember, east is right on your map. You ride for days and days. Slowly, you seem to touch the sky. There are mountains that seem to touch the sky. These are the Himalayas, the highest mountains in the world. Mount Everest, the tallest peak in the Himalayas, juts up almost into space. Up on top of Mount Everest, the air is too thin to breathe, and snow and ice stay on the mountain all year long. As you begin to come down on the other side of the mountain range, you see villages tucked into rocky slopes. The people who live here are tough and strong. They raise mountain sheep and make warm clothing from their fleas. You ride further south, veering a little to the west. West is left on your map. The air goes hotter and hotter. The ground becomes sandy and flat. The horse stumbles in deep sand. Sweat rolls down in your face. When the wind blows, sand whirls up from the ground. It gets into your mouth, your eyes, and your clothes. This is the Thar Desert, where it hardly ever rains. You decide you better get out of the desert, so you head east again. East is right on your map. Slowly you begin to see trees and grass. The sand gives way to dry dirt and then to rich black soil. Ahead of you, you can see the blue gleam of a river. You will come to the Ganges, the most important river in India. Each year, the Ganges overflows and leaves damp, black silt all over the ground. This silt is like fertilizer and makes crops grow. Houses are all around you. Thousands of people live here near the river. In your journey, you see mountains, deserts, and river villages. This is the only small part of India. If you were to keep going south, you would cross over more mountains and rivers. Eventually, you would come to the coast of India, where palm trees grow in tropical jungles across the edge of the sea, where the villagers hunt tigers and ride elephants. India has many different parts of it. So for hundreds of years, India had many different parts of it. So for hundreds of years, the Indian people lived in small different kingdoms. A man named Chandragupta wanted to make all those kingdoms into one large Indian empire. At first, Chandragupta ruled a little kingdom near the Ganges River, but he managed to conquer a few of the little kingdoms nearby, and his son conquered even more, and his grandson conquered even more. Eventually, Chandragupta's descendants ruled over the whole upper part of India. Chandragupta had found a dynasty of family that rules over one area of the world for many years. Listen for the names the kings in this dynasty: Champakura, Sampakura, Kampakura, and Sekundukura. All of these kings were part of the Gupta dynasty. Under the Guptas, India became powerful and peaceful and rich. Indian poets and playwrights wrote great works in the Indian language. Sanskrit artists painted and sculpted in copper and iron. Scholars learned books and mathematics and astronomy. Indian doctors even learned how to reattach ears and noses that had been cut off. This time is often called the Golden Age of India. But then the barbarians came. Barbarian tribes called the Huns had already attacked Rome and Byzantium. They swooped down into India. The peoples of India had been divided into many small kingdoms. The Hun might be able to destroy them. But the king of India, Sekundura, rallied his people together into one strong army. And Sekundura to lead them, the Indians managed to drive the Huns away from the empire. Sekundura people praised him for saving them. They made coins with pictures on them, with his picture on them. They carved his portrait into wax. Sekundura had been embraced by the goddess of wealth and splendor. They exclaimed. India had survived the barbarian attacks, but fighting off the Huns made India poorer and weaker. Slowly, different parts of the empire began to divide and separate into small kingdoms once more. By the year 550, the Gupta dynasty of India came to an end. The golden age of India was over. Monks in caves. Do you remember the monks of England? Instead of having families, they lived together in monasteries and spent the rest of their lives working, praying. India also had monks. These monks were followers of a man called Buddha. Buddha was an Indian prince who had left his palace many years before to live the life of a beggar. He taught that anyone, no matter how poor or sick or miserable, could find happiness by leading a good life. In England, the monks lived in buildings made of wood and stone, but the Indian monks who lived near the mountain, carved their monastery right out the side of the cliffs. They had large caves where they met and ate together around tables made of stone. Small bare caves called cells surrounded these large caves. Their cells the monks could go to be alone, to sleep, or to think about teachings of the Buddha. Passageways and some stone bridges connected the caves together. The monks worked for years to build their monasteries. They didn't have a dynamic or explosives to carve out the caves. Instead, they hacked long trenches in the rock with iron tools. They put log into the trenches and filled the trenches with water. The log soaked up the water and began to swell. As they swelled, they pushed against the sides of the rock, and it cracked into bits. When the caves were dug out, the monks started to decorate them. They carved away walls with tiny sharp chisels, just a little wider than your thumb. A bit by bit, a beautiful sculpture emerged from the stone walls. Some of the stone sculptures show scenes from the life of Buddha. Other figures seem to act out stories that Buddha told. Stone elephants as large as life, and the entrance to several caves. In one of the caves, the rock ceiling is carved to look like wooden rafters in an old temple. A huge statue of Buddha sits beneath the rafters on an enormous rock throne. In other caves, monks painted frescoes. They covered the rough stone walls with ceilings with plaster and then painted the plaster while it was still wet. When the plaster dried, the painting dried with it and became a part of the wall. Frescoes stayed bright and colorful for years, but paintings on fresher plaster is like painting on pudding. If the painter makes a mistake, he can't wipe it out. He has to paint perfectly the first time. These caves are called the Ajanta caves. The monks lived in them for years and years. But slowly they moved away to the other monasteries. The caves were used less and less. By the year 650, hundreds of years after the Golden Age of India ended, most people have forgotten about the Ajanta caves. Only a few pilgrims remembered them. Hundreds of years later, two soldiers were hunting the attractive tiger in the Diverted Valley, following the trees and disturbs. They were searching through the bush for tiger tracks when they found an entrance to Ajanta caves. They went through the cave, stone elephants carved for Buddha, and the colorful paintings lay undisturbed, just as they had been since the monks left. The officers told everyone they knew about the caves. More and more people came to see the sculptures and frescoes. Soon hundreds of people were visiting the caves every day. Some of the visitors began to take away parts of sculptures to put in museums. They even cut off the heads of some of the paintings before the sculptures and paintings could be destroyed, the government of India ordered wire screens to be put around them. Now the Ajanta caves are safe. The visitors can see the art carved by the monks of India more than thousands of years ago. The rise of Islam. Far, far away, a Roman caste temple, hot, dry desert lay under the blazing sun. The desert on the Arabian Peninsula has water on three sides. It is parched and sandy. During the day, the sun beats down on the desert with blistering heat. Sand blows down through the air. Sometimes the blowing sand is so thick that you can hardly breathe. Little clumps of palm trees dot the burning sand. The clumps are called oases. If you dig deep enough, you can find water in an oasis, but not very much. A desert is hard and a dangerous place to live, but strong, determined tribes called the people Bedouins managed to live in the Arabian Peninsula and even build cities there. One of these cities was called Mecca. Over 1,000 years ago, an orphan boy named Muhammad lived in Mecca. He lived with his grandfather and uncle. Although they had little money, Muhammad learned that Bedouin should always help the poor. They eat food and longing to strangers if they needed it. Take care of the sick. He helped his uncle herd his flocks of sheep, worked hard. Soon he became known as Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy one. But when Muhammad looked around him, he saw other Bedouins tricking the poor and sick badly. The men around him drank too much. They gambled their money away instead of buying food for their children. And they worshipped many different idols. Muhammad spent more and more time alone. He liked to go into the desert, away from the more crowded, noisy city of Mecca, to think and pray in a dark, quiet cave. He wondered what makes men change their ways. How would they become better? One day, something odd happened to Muhammad in his quiet cave. Here's the story of Muhammad and his followers. Tell it. Muhammad sat alone in his cave. The sun had set. The hot desert sand was cooling in the night air. A breeze blew gently into the cave. He closed his eyes. Silence was all around him. Suddenly he heard a faint musical sound. It grew louder and louder, as though bells were ringing. All around him, he opened his eyes, but he couldn't see nothing but rock and sand. Then a voice came from the darkness. Recite, it ordered. Muhammad knew that he was being asked to recite and repeat divine words, and he was afraid. I am not a reciter, he called. Suddenly, he was afraid. I'm not a reciter, he called out. Suddenly, he felt himself crushed in the tight embrace of an angel who demanded again, recite. Terrified, Muhammad ran into the desert. But the boy spoke to him again. Muhammad, he said, you are the messenger of Allah, the one true God, and I am the angel of Gabriel. Muhammad looked up. Above him, he saw the angel Gabriel, like a huge shining man with the feet on the edge of the sky. Light came pouring down from Gabriel. As Muhammad watched, Gabriel disappears into the sky. What do you think Muhammad did next? Muhammad flees to Medina. After his vision, Muhammad ran home. He told his wife and his family what happened to him. The most important thing I've learned is that all the idols, the Bedouin sources, is false. There's only one God, and he is called Allah. You're a prophet, Muhammad's wife exclaimed. He believed Muhammad's story. So did Muhammad's cousins, his servants, and 3 others. The six people were the very first Muslims. Muhammad's teaching became known as Islam, and those who followed his teachings were called Muslims. At first, Muhammad only talked about Allah to these six followers, but after a few years went by, he began preaching to others in Mecca. He walked through the city proclaiming, "There is only one true God, and his name is Allah. He created the universe and he rules it. And on the day of judgment, Allah will look at your life and reward or punish you. So share with the poor, don't be greedy. And spend all your time trying to make money, worshipping idols, worship Allah." Many poor people in Mecca liked what Muhammad was saying, but rich people were worried that when they heard his teachings. "Share money with the poor," they said to each other. "We don't want to do that. What will happen if we stop believing the idols of Mecca? They won't come to the city to worship anymore. They won't buy food, drinks, or special clothes to wear at the temple. We won't make any more money by selling these things." So the rich and powerful of Mecca started to persecute the poor slaves and workers who had converted to Islam. They threw stones at them, forced them to leave the city, or put them in jail. And no one would sell food to Muhammad and his family. He had sent friends to buy food secretly. They brought the food to his house in the middle of the night so no one could see them. Things in Mecca grew worse and worse for the Muslims. Soon more and more Muslims began to leave the city. They went to a nearby city, Medina, which welcomed them. The leaders of Medina even invited Muhammad to come and preach them. "Come to Medina," he told them. "We will promise only to worship Allah. We won't steal anymore or tell lies. We'll do anything you tell us." Muhammad would rather have stayed in Mecca. He didn't want to leave his home, but most of his followers had gone. Soon he and one friend, Abu Bakr, was the only Muslims left in the city. One night, Muhammad and his friend Abu Bakr was sitting in the Muhammad's home, eating their supper when someone hammered frantically. "Muhammad!" the visitor hissed. "Muhammad, you must let me in." Muhammad went to the door. He peered out, but he didn't recognize the man who stood there. "Who are you?" "A friend," the stranger asked. "There is a plot to kill you. The leaders of the town are sending soldiers right now to murder you in your home. If you want to leave Mecca at once." And then he slipped away into the night. Muhammad and Abu Bakr left their plates and cups on the table and ran. They ran through the dark, empty streets of Mecca to the city gates. As they ran, they heard behind them the soldiers of Muhammad's found the house empty. "Quick," Muhammad said, "to the mountains. We'll hide in a cave there." They hurried down the road, hurrying soldiers behind them. Soon they found a small dark cave and crept into it. They waited there, hardly breathing, hoping that the soldiers would pass by them. But Muslims say that the soldiers got to search the cave. They paused, wondering whether to search it or not. Though one of them noticed a spider web not stretching all across the cave front. He poked at it. The strands were thick and odd, with dust. "This spider web hasn't been here for days." If Muhammad and Abu Bakr had been into this cave, they would have broken the web. They can't be here. The soldiers marched on. When Muhammad and Abu Bakr finally came out of the cave, the soldiers had passed them by. They traveled to Medina, 200 miles away. The Muslims of Medina heard that Muhammad the Prophet was arriving. They poured out of the city to greet him, cheering and praising Allah. Muhammad's journey to Mecca and Medina has a special name, Hajj. Hajj is so important to Muslims that they count their years beginning from Hajj. Remember, for Christians, Jesus' birth is the first year of the calendar. So the year AD or CE came from 2,000 years after birth, but Muslims don't count their years from the birth of Jesus. They birth their 100 years from year of Hajj. So year that Muhammad went to Medina is AH1, the first year after Hajj. This is the end of this video. Today we read about India and India and the Eastern Roman Empire. So I think the most important part of today's book is the Indian monks that built the caves in the mountains and lived there for days and days. This is the end of this video. Bye.